Vaccines work. It's safe. It's not political. It's medical. We're honestly tired of seeing unvaccinated people come in sick and have to be admitted.
But it is also true that doctors care for everybody, no matter how they got sick. What this is really about is the politicization. So here's the question, and it's a question that nobody on the left has been willing to answer. So the left wants the right to answer, how many deaths are you willing to take for freedom? And the answer on the right is some, right? Because this is true for virtually all human activity. We all don't, here's the thing. Human beings don't tend to think about risk level very often. We don't, right? If you thought about the risk level of driving your car every day, and it were just every day in the media, if you get in your car, you got a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying today getting in your car. If you thought about that every single day, you might not want to get in your car. Maybe like, I'm going to get an Uber, I'm going to get on a bus, right? But you don't think about it. So in your mind, risk is binary. There are things that are risky and things that are not risky. It is not as though you actually sit there and you calculate the risks of all the things. They're just the things that are quote unquote risky and the things that are quote unquote not risky. So for example, skydiving. You think of this as a risky activity. I think of it as a risky activity. The truth is, you're probably I think significantly more likely to die in a car accident than you are to die skydiving. But one immediately goes to, I'm jumping out of a plane. That sounds riskier than getting behind the wheel of a car. So one is risky and one is not risky. In your mind, driving around every day is a risk factor of 0. In reality, your risk factor driving around is significantly higher, depending on your age bracket, and certainly post-vaccination, than your risk of dying from COVID. Okay, this is just statistically the reality. Post-vaccination, there's no question. You are significantly more likely to die in a car accident than you are to die from COVID-19 after you're vaccinated. And yet you see vaccinated people who have put living normal life in the category of very risky, living without a mask in the category of very risky. And so the question for those people is, so when it comes to freedom, we all recognize in normal areas of life, sort of in the back of our mind, we recognize that there's a risk of death to freedom. Right? Anytime you go to a ball game, there could be a terrorist attack. Anytime you go out driving, you could get in a car accident. Anytime you walk out your front door, there's a risk of something bad happening to you. And we all accept that as part of normal life. And so the question is, how much risk are you willing to accept in order to continue normal life? And the answer is post-vaccination, you should be living your normal life. Post-vaccination, we should all get back to living our normal life post-vaccination because there is no alternative but to do so. Okay? Otherwise, these are your choices. Get back to normal life post-vaccination or spend the rest of your life masking and waiting for the government to tell you what to do. That is it. Those are your choices. For the left, there's no limiting principle. For people who have become COVID crazy, there is no limiting principle to this. For them, I ask a question. What level of freedom are you willing to give up to prevent very small numbers of death? What level of freedom? In Australia, the answer is all of it. Okay, this should scare everybody in the West. In Australia, the answer is literally all the freedom. Australia is a country of some 25 million people. The Australian COVID death rates, day on day, are like 3. Australia has been having about 3 deaths a day from COVID. They are having 800, 900 cases of Delta because it turns out you cannot just shield yourself behind Fortress Ocean forever, which is what Australia tried to do. For a year, Australia basically made it that you could not travel into Australia. They basically tried to have a plague city, right? They were just going to cut off all outside contact with the outside world. And then one person entered with Delta, and now they have an explosion in new cases. By the way, they did not bother to get everybody vaccinated because they were so confident in their ability to shut out the outside world that their vaccination rate in Australia, remember, America's terrible for our vaccination rate, right? We're the worst. We're just awful. It doesn't matter. That vast majority of adults in the United States above the age of 18, like over 70%, have had the vaccine already. In Australia, the number of adults, the percentage of adults who have been vaccinated in Australia is about 25%, about 1/4. So they have a huge unvaccinated, vulnerable population. So because of that, Australia has decided they're going to crack down. And when they say they're going to crack down, I mean they are going to crack down. So here is a little bit of tape from 9 News in Australia talking about the measures they are taking. This is full authoritarian lockdown with no limiting principle in sight.
There's little sympathy for anyone ignoring the health orders, even this group of teenagers caught partying after dark at the bottom of the North Bondi Cliffs. Herded to higher ground by Polaire's spotlight and speaker, the 8 boys were placed in handcuffs and left to explain a $1,000 fine to mum.
681 penalty infringement notices issued in the last 24 hours. More than 400 of those notices were again for people being outside of their home without a reasonable excuse.
Okay, this is dystopian insanity. They've locked people in their homes in a country of 25 million people for 3 to 4 deaths a day. Okay, and they've locked them down. They're locking them down for weeks over there. They outlawed protest, by the way. In fact, we were told yesterday on the program by a journalist from Australia that they have outlawed even saying things in favor of protest in Australia, because that would be promoting breaking the law. So what kind of tyranny are you willing to undergo in order to never get back to real life and avoid all risk forever? And then you're going to have to ask another question, which is, how much pressure are you willing to bring on the unvaccinated in order to get them to vaccinate, again, in order to protect their own lives? So there's a story on MSNBC that was making the rounds yesterday. 75 doctors claimed that they walked off the job to protest the unvaccinated. In reality, that's not really what was happening. Apparently, what was actually happening is they exited the building to encourage people to get vaccinated, which is fine, right? You want to encourage people to get vaccinated, that's fine. MSNBC covered it as though these doctors were saying that they did not want to care for the unvaccinated. Okay, here is a little bit of the tape from MSNBC.
As I step out here, I can see they're all standing here, white jackets, some coming off of their shifts. Your thoughts about why it's gotten to this point that people are gathered like this?
We feel that people think it's political, and it's not. It's medical. I have all my colleagues behind me, and we're all here as physicians to say one message: vaccines work. It's safe. It's not political. It's medical. And we're very passionate about it because we're honestly tired of seeing unvaccinated people come in sick and have to be admitted.
Okay, so the way that the left covered this is their suggestion was that the doctors were refusing to care for the unvaccinated. And there was a lot of talk in the media about how we should be triaging in favor of the vaccinated over the unvaccinated, as opposed to triaging based on who's most likely to survive in a crisis scenario, which is usually how you triage, right? You actually look at the health conditions of the people underlying. Is it an 85-year-old with terminal cancer, or is it a 30-year-old who's generally healthy but has the disease and now can be triaged? Right? The attempt here is to suggest that people don't deserve medical care if they're unvaccinated. Now, I've said that if you're unvaccinated, that is on you. But it is also true that doctors care for everybody, no matter how they got sick. Right? If somebody wheels a person into the ER who was shot in a gang duel, in a bout of gang violence, the doctors don't say, well, they kind of brought it on themselves. They were in a sort of gang violence scenario. I guess I'm not caring for this, but that's not what doctors do. If somebody comes in and they're morbidly obese and they've been told by their doctor for literally their entire life that they need to start eating healthy and lose weight, and now they have heart disease, the doctor isn't like, well, I did tell you shouldn't do that. Right? That is not how medicine is practiced. And I find it rather dystopian and scary that there are people on the left who are saying this sort of stuff. People on the left are saying this. They're saying if you're unvaccinated and you come into the hospital shouldn't treat you. I'm amused to see, however, many people on the left say things like, if you come into the hospital unvaccinated, you should be responsible for your own medical bills. That I'm in favor for. I'm in favor of that, except not with regard to vaccination and not vaccination. I'm in favor of that for everything. We call that a privatized medical healthcare system, right? In which you are responsible for your own health. Okay, but again, what this is really about is the politicization. I'm amazed to watch people on the left say that the right is politicizing this. No, when you have Dr. Fauci saying it doesn't matter what mask you wear, you just need to mask up post-vaccination everywhere. And when you have Joe Biden saying you need to mask your kids every time they leave the house, and when you have Joe Biden saying your business should tell people that they cannot work for you if they are unvaccinated, who's making that political? And what's the real goal? The real goal, of course, is to distract from the reason we're doing that this week right now, the reason we've upped the ante is not because the stats show that we should up the ante this week as opposed to like 3 or 4 weeks ago. The reason that we are doing this right now is because Joe Biden needs to redirect away from the gigantic failure we are currently experiencing in Afghanistan and the crisis that is likely to materialize over the course of the next week. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.